Coming up, I'll reveal Great Britain's dark secret. It doesn't just implicate the Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, but virtually all the main institutions of English society. Robert Malone, MD, he's inventor of mRNA vaccines and an internationally renowned scientist, joins me to talk about the aftermath of COVID, but also what we should make about the so-called bird flu epidemic. If you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
I want to talk in this opening segment about, three things. A brief comment about the certification of Trump's election. I want to introduce the topic of Mark Zuckerberg and his latest announcement about censorship, which I won't go into detail about today. I'm going to cover it in more granular detail tomorrow, but I want to mention it. And then I want to talk about Elon Musk and his battle with the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. So let's begin with Trump, because one of the big themes of the media coverage of Trump and the certification was that this has been so normal. It is so uneventful. It is so smooth. And of course, in doing this, the media is trying to make the point, what a refreshing contrast from the last time, which was so tumultuous, January 6th of 2021, the so-called insurrection. But of course, the reason that things were so normal this time is because Republicans don't steal elections. The reason that everyone can say very confidently that this election was free and fair is because nobody would dream of alleging that Republicans have either the motive or the temperament or even the wits to steal an election. If Republicans wanted to steal an election, they wouldn't know how to go about it. Democrats have been cultivating these techniques for a long time. The other thing I think that's interesting is that the Democrats have been saying now for 4 years straight or longer that Trump is Hitler. They tuned up the volume before the election. This fascism is on the ballot. Democracy is on the ballot. The implication being that it would be the straight out end of democracy if Trump were elected. Now, how does that square with all the media assurances that all of this was perfectly normal? This is just what we do in America. It's just a democratic transition, guys. So I think that it's pretty obvious that the people who said that Trump was Hitler were lying. They were engaging in a kind of deception, a propaganda, a gaslighting, and it's now become blatantly obvious. This is worth remembering if we ever get more of this in the future, that these people are just not to be believed. What they're saying is incredible in the literal meaning of the term. It is incredible. It lacks credibility. It's unbelievable. It is, in fact, not to be believed. Now, I don't know if I believe Mark Zuckerberg when he says, I've had a change of heart. It seems to me that what's going on here is that Zuckerberg is a kind of opportunist. He is a guy who goes where the wind blows. And when the Democrats are in power, he is like, oh, well, listen, I've got to grease the skids. I've got to play nice. They want to do censorship, so I'll do censorship. They are very worried about people spreading misinformation, so I'll help them to shut down that so-called misinformation. And then when Trump gets elected, oh, whoops. The remarkable thing about Zuckerberg's recent statement were the things that he said that run so counter to what he's been saying before, but also so counter to what the mainstream narrative is that Zuckerberg has very much been a part of. The first thing is he says the election was a tipping point for free speech. So he's admitting that elections have consequences. He's, in a sense, confessing that he's going along with the meaning and the outcome of the election. Second, he said the legacy media has been pushing censorship on me nonstop. And so here he reveals that the legacy media, the mainstream media, think of how strange this is, right? We think of the media as a defender of free speech, as the advocate for the First Amendment, but no. The big losers from Zuckerberg's statement, if I were to enumerate, would be as follows. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, NPR, PBS, CBS, ABC, NBC, MSNBC, CNN. These are all this is the collective censorship lobby right here. And because they are not in a position themselves to do the censorship, they pressure digital platforms to do it on their behalf or with their cheerleading consent. And the third thing that Zuckerberg said is he said, we're no longer going to be censoring these immigration and gender topics. Notice very carefully chosen words. They were censoring people advocating for shutting down the border, for deportation, and they were censoring people particularly broadly on the LGBTQ agenda, but very specifically on the trans issue. Speaking on that issue is almost an automatic way to get a strike or a deplatforming or even having your whole channel taken down altogether. Now, we'll wait and see what Zuckerberg actually does, but I do think that his mea culpa is a significant moment, just because really when you think about the censorship regime on the digital platforms, it's down to two, right? It used to be X plus YouTube / Google. Google owns YouTube. And then third, Meta or Facebook / Instagram. That's the Zuckerberg empire. Once Elon Musk bought X was kind of now a free speech platform, or largely so. And so all you got left is Zuckerberg plus Google / YouTube. And if Zuckerberg really shows that he's going to stop all this nonsense, then all you have is YouTube and Google. And I think they're going to be under a lot of pressure to pull back from that also. And that will be a great victory for free speech. Notice a victory for free speech won without even having to get a Supreme Court ruling, but really because of the platforms themselves, or the moguls who control these platforms, having a change of heart. I'll just talk briefly about this spat between Elon Musk and Keir Starmer. It has to do with the revelation that there has been a major cover-up in British politics, a cover-up involving Starmer himself, the British Labour Party, the members of Parliament, but also the academic establishment, the schools, the police force. There have been a lot of horrific rapes of young British girls, and a lot of this done by Muslims, by Pakistani Muslims in Britain. It's a huge scandal. It's now being talked about because of Elon Musk's focus on it all over X and in many parts of the world. It's essentially embarrassed Starmer. It's embarrassed the United Kingdom, because this is a case, as with COVID in the United States, the establishment came together to sort of protect the rapists, if you will. And so there's a lot of blowback now against Elon Musk. I see all these British MPs, mainly from the Labour Party. Elon Musk should not interfere in British politics. And this notion, by the way, is echoed by people like Angela Merkel in Germany, Macron in France. They're worried about Elon Musk interfering in their politics. Well, wait. What about George Soros and now his son Alex Soros? What about Bill Gates? What about all the other millionaires and billionaires that are meddling in politics all over the place? There are many foreign billionaires that interfere in our politics. I think it's a Swiss billionaire named Hans Wyss. This guy actively funds left-wing groups in the United States and attempts to subvert the MAGA movement all the way from Europe. As a guy pulling the levers over there. So there's nothing new about Elon Musk. This is just generating alarm because for a change, the pressure is coming from the right. And as a result, these establishment and left-wing figures are now feeling the heat, feeling the pain, and jumping up and saying, "Oh, stay out of we don't really want any foreign interference in our affairs." Well, when it benefited your side, you were okay with it. So now that it doesn't benefit your side, deal with it. Every new year, we spend a few days thinking about what we can do to improve our lives, and usually it revolves around better health, right? I want to strongly encourage you to do what I do, and that is take responsibility for your health by taking Balance of Nature. That's this right here. It's fruits and veggies in a capsule, whole food ingredient supplement. Seriously, they're packed with 31 varieties of fruit and vegetable ingredients, from tomatoes to sweet potatoes and just about everything in between. This is a resolution you can truly keep all year long, like I do. It's your last time to put it off, because today you can become a preferred customer at Balance of Nature. Use my discount code AMERICA to get 35% off, free shipping, plus a free fiber and spice supplement. This is an unbelievable limited New Year's promotion, but you got to use my discount code AMERICA. Here's the number to call, 800-246-8751. Again, it's 800-246-8751, or go to balanceofnature.com. When you use discount code AMERICA, you get it, 35% off, plus a free fiber and spice supplement.
Just like all of you, I had problems sleeping. I had tried every pillow out there and nothing worked. I'd flip-flop all night, use my arm for support, and fall asleep, or I'd wake up with a sore neck or maybe a headache. Well, quality sleep comes from keeping your neck straight at night. You have to fill in that space between your head and your bed. That's why I invented MyPillow. MyPillow's patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs, and it doesn't matter if you sleep on your back, stomach, side, or any combination of all three.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night, and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get Classic King MyPillows for only $19.98. Queen size just $18.98. Standard Classic MyPillows only $14.98. That's right, only $14.98. Plus all orders $75 or more ship absolutely free.
Guys, I'm really honored and delighted to welcome to the podcast Dr. Robert Malone. He is an internationally recognized scientist, in fact, the original inventor of the mRNA vaccination. He has innumerable patents. He is also the president of the Malone Institute, which wants to bring back scientific integrity to government. He has a Substack, and he also has a book, a best-selling book called Lies My Government Told Me. Great title. You can follow him on X at RWMaloneMD, and the website is just maloneinstitute.org. Robert, thank you for joining me. This is your first time on this podcast. I think I wish I had you on before, but better late than never. I want to talk to you about bird flu. I want to talk to you about COVID. But before we go there, let me ask you to react to this announcement by Mark Zuckerberg, accompanied by a video, a kind of a mea culpa, where he says that, the censorship was kind of well-meaning, but it went a little too far, and we're going to now rein it back, and no more fact-checkers. We're now going to adopt the model from Elon Musk's X and use community notes. So this appears to be a new posture by Zuckerberg. Are you impressed? Do you buy this conversion story? What do you think is going on?
Oh, yes, he definitely has found religion. And I think the moment was the announcement that Donald Trump won the election. I'm sorry. I really I am very reticent to absolve Mr. Zuckerberg from the very aggressive stance of policing that he is in his organization has taken on, broadly writ. I personally stayed off of Facebook. We use Facebook to sell our horses for our horse farm, and that's become almost impossible. Any mention of my name by anyone has been almost immediately censored. Implicit in Mr. Zuckerberg's statement is that the fact-checking operation was a form of intentional censorship. And so he's now saying, well, I'm no longer going to intentionally censor Facebook. We'll see that. Let's watch and see what actually happens. He's made prior statements to the effect that they're not going to be as aggressive in policing Facebook. And yet those that are on Facebook report to me, including my wife, that that's Dr. Jill Glasspool Malone and partner, that they have still experienced just the same censorship and restrictions. And Facebook has really become quite adept at feeding its user base, which is increasingly older females. The young have abandoned it to the likes of Joe Rogan and TikTok. But Facebook has become very adroit at pushing various commercial agendas and sponsored agendas, and it's really no longer a open communication platform, and you can see that in the lack of enthusiasm for that platform, particularly in the 30-somethings and younger. Over.
Yeah, I mean, it's important for people to realize how this whole fact-checking operation works. I mean, you've got these so-called professional fact-checkers. They have no training in the spheres in which they exercise authority. You take somebody like you, who's a world-renowned scientist in a particular field, and yet you're vulnerable to being censored by people who wouldn't be able to understand your textbook or wouldn't be able to follow one of your lectures. How do you wrap your head around that?
Don't even have an undergraduate degree in biology. This has been the case since the outset of the COVID crisis, this recruitment of unqualified third parties to basically parrot whatever is the government line. And it's much more insidious than what you're talking about. It's part of a whole matrix of, Schellenberger and others have called it the censorship industrial complex. Particularly notorious was the GARM agreement and the GARM structure, which became a funnel. So GARM was an international organization. It's now, because of Musk's lawsuit, they decommissioned GARM as a nonprofit, but the function is still being assumed by other entities. But GARM operated internationally to channel this censorship agenda, and it was brought forward by a series of subcontractors or contractors that were hired basically because of their DEI credentials, that would then screen information, because of course the internet is too big to police. So they would functionally screen the internet and flag posts or information or individuals that would feed up to GARM. And then GARM would be the channel through which information was coordinated with advertisers. And this is how you ended up with these functional blockades, financial blockades of individuals, perhaps even yourself, that might say things from time to time that were disagreeable to whomever this loose network of fact checkers and other nonprofit entities, the Center for Countering Digital Hate being one of the most notorious of those, that would then feed this up. This was documented by, I think it was the House Committee on Weaponization of Government. And in my case, just to put a pin on it, not to make it personal, it was disclosed by that committee that the real attack on Joe Rogan, after I went on with that notorious podcast where I spoke of mass formation psychosis, that's a very threatening thing, and a number of other things, that was actually Coca-Cola putting pressure through GARM on Spotify to deplatform Joe Rogan. All of the chitter chatter about the Laurel Canyon crowd of Joni Mitchell and Neil Young, etc., pulling their music off of Spotify, that was just a distraction. The real power behind what came at Joe Rogan was Coca-Cola pushing through GARM. So this is a major entity that we're dealing with here. And it is, I always say it's just a metaphor. Come on, guys. Conservatives buy Mercedes-Benzes also. Why don't we see advertising for luxury goods, for example, on conservative media? The reason is because of these structures that function to censor individuals through a variety of nefarious schemes. This also includes the CDC program Shots Heard Around the World, operating under the umbrella of the Public Good Projects, which is a full-on crowd-stalking, gang-stalking operation funded by the Foundation for CDC. I mean, the stuff that's gone on here has been amazing. You mentioned, thank you, Lies My Government Told Me, but the current book is Psywar, Enforcing the New World Order. So it's all about fifth-generation warfare, psychological warfare, and all these various strategies that have been evolved and developed since the origin of propaganda and the notorious book by Edward Bernays. It's really become quite highly developed, and it is a weapon for controlling thought, emotion, belief, etc., through controlling information. And of course, bringing it back to your point with Zuckerberg, the key tool here that's made all this really so much more powerful is the ability to use these various social media platforms to control information, to control the information that you have access to. Google being among the notorious for that.
Let's take a pause. When we come back, I want to ask Dr. Malone to apply these techniques of manipulation and propaganda both to the current purported bird flu epidemic and also to show how they were used relentlessly during COVID. We're right in the new year, guys. I'd like to invite you to check out my Locals channel. Consider becoming an annual subscriber. I post a lot of exclusive content there, including content that's censored on other social media platforms. On Locals, you get Dinesh Unchained, Dinesh Uncensored. You can also interact with me directly. I do a weekly Q&A every Tuesday. That's today. No topic is off limits. I've also uploaded some cool films to Locals. I've got Dinesh's movie page up there. 2000 Mules is up there, A Police State, and also the latest film, Vindicating Trump. If you're an annual subscriber, you can stream and watch this movie content for free. It's included with your subscription. So check out the channel. It's dinesh.locals.com. I'd love to have you along for this great ride. Again, it's dinesh.locals.com.
This past year has been one of the hardest in MyPillow's history. It's because of you that we're making it through. My employees and I want to thank you for your continued support by extending our wholesale prices on classic MyPillows. Get standard classic MyPillows only $14.98. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.98. But it gets even better. Upgrade to a queen size MyPillow for just $18.98. King size only $1 more. Get my body pillows $29.98 and multi-use MyPillows for only $9.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of these wholesale prices, including my standard size MyPillow, originally $49.98, now only $14.98. Queens $18.98, Kings only $1 more. Not only that, order $75 or more, ship absolutely free. From all of us here at MyPillow, thanks America!
Back with Dr. Robert Malone, the inventor of mRNA vaccination. Follow him on X at RW Malone MD, the website maloneinstitute.org. Robert, let's talk about this latest brouhaha about bird flu. First of all, tell us a little bit about what bird flu is and how you get it, but also what's going on here. Is this a genuine major public concern, or do you think that there's more to it than meets the eye?
So the concern if you distill down all of the hype and promoted fear, what I call psychological bioterrorism, or what's otherwise known as information bioterrorism that's going on, and you strip all that away, get down to the essentials. Bird flu is one variant of influenza. It's one that's particularly adapted to avian species, hence the name bird flu. It is highly lethal, or has been in the past. There's been a variety of bird flu outbreaks, but highly lethal to avian species. Birds, particularly migratory waterfowl, carry large amounts of influenza virus in their stool. And influenza virus survives for a very long period of time in water. So migratory waterfowl are absolutely a vector for spreading avian influenza or any other influenza that they carry along their flyways. Of course, that reaches down into Latin America and up to Canada. So it can be highly lethal. And when you talk about high path avian influenza, you're talking about highly pathogenic to birds. Now, the World Health Organization has a roster of avian influenza cases that it has accumulated over the last approximately decade. It's a few hundred. And one of the things that's important to understand, if we didn't learn this lesson from COVID, is that for a case to make it to the roster on the World Health Organization, it's generally a very severe case and one that was perplexing in some way to the local physicians. So there's a selection bias towards more severe disease when it makes it to the WHO. So the WHO announced that it, in aggregate, sees a 50% case fatality rate. That's to say that 1 in 2 people would die from bird flu in its roster. But its roster is highly biased, just like the overestimates of mortality we saw with SARS-CoV-2. And so the truth is that avian influenza has been with us as a form of avian pneumonia since the late 1800s is when it was first detected. It was identified specifically in about 1959 in the United States. And I've put out Substacks, I think it's 5 or 6 now, about avian influenza and about what the actual facts are behind this. And most recently, I addressed a manuscript that had been published in an obscure poultry journal by a colleague of mine that had been on Alex Jones, that was asserting that the current circulating bird flu was a product of gain-of-function research at the University of Georgia. That is, in my opinion, not credible. And I cited manuscripts there and quoted from them academic manuscripts that demonstrate how avian influenza has been in flux over the many decades across Europe, Asia, and the United States. So let's talk about what matters. Infection in humans, that's what we're concerned about. Now, we've just recently, the USDA, have recently started widespread testing for avian influenza in a variety of species. And when you test more, you find more. They weren't previously testing cattle, but then they found that the cattle were positive. The cattle were, I don't know if you've ever spent any time with cows, but they're slobbery, mucousy critters. And the fact that they may have a little bit of a red eye and runny nose would be hard to detect in most cases. So what has been discovered is that the glands of the udder that produce milk will support the replication of avian influenza. And so there is avian influenza in milk. Is this new? Does it survive pasteurization? No, pasteurization kills it. And we don't know whether this is new or old, how many decades it's been going on, because we haven't been testing. Is it a major threat? The current case count in the United States is that we have a little north of 60 cases. And just today, we have the first death. Okay, so 60 cases, 1 death. It was in Louisiana. It was an elderly gentleman with multiple pre-existing conditions. So he was already sick. He was somehow working with chicken carcasses, and he developed an indolent, a kind of a slow burning H5N1 infection that, together with his other sickness, eventually, unfortunately, ended his life just in the last 24 hours. So the first death, so 60 plus cases, one death that wasn't really due to avian influenza, that doesn't add up to 50% mortality, as has been asserted by the former director of the CDC, Bob Redfield. Here's the key thing about any of these respiratory viruses, or really any pathogen. Two key things you have to watch. Number one, is there evidence of sustained human-to-human transmission? In the case of bird flu, the answer is no, unequivocally no. And is there a significant level of morbidity or mortality? That's fancy doctor talk for does it put you in the hospital or make you sick or kill you? And the answer is no on that also. So appropriately, I can't believe that I'm saying this, the CDC and the new director of NIAID, who's replaced Tony Fauci, have come out with editorials and statements that assert that bird flu is a low-risk pathogen currently in the United States, despite what Lena Wen and Bob Redfield and others are saying. Okay, so this is not something to worry about now. Could it turn into something worrisome? I like to say if pigs had wings, they could fly. There's a lot of things that could happen, coulda, shoulda, woulda, but we have literally over a century of exposure to avian influenza across all major continents and no evidence of major human death associated with avian influenza. It could always happen. And there have been gain-of-function research studies, including the ones that resulted in the gain-of-function research ban that Obama put in place, that have identified specific point mutations, that's to say genetic changes, in avian influenza, which could enable it to transmit to other mammals, including possibly human-to-human transmission. So we know that there are some things that could happen. But so far they haven't happened and they're being monitored for. So that's my threat assessment is I'm aligned really with the CDC and the NIAID. Again, I'm shocked to be able to say that, but pleased also that maybe we've entered a new era. And the position of both institutions is that it's appropriate to monitor. It's appropriate to continue to seek to develop medical countermeasures, which may include may include vaccines. And yes, they have spent hundreds of millions of dollars to develop RNA vaccines. And they have, BARDA, I'm referring to a branch of HHS, has contracted to acquire over 5 million doses of a currently unlicensed vaccine. There is no medical emergency, so there can't be any emergency use authorization. I think that's a pretty good synopsis of where we stand. Do you have any questions, Dinesh? Did I make that clear?
Very clear. My question moves in a slightly different direction and picks up, if you will, from COVID, which is that because of all the government-sponsored misinformation with COVID, a lot of people, particularly on the right of center, the Trump movement, if you will, have become, I think, justifiably skeptical of government authority in this area, and tend to say, that's just nonsense. That's not really real. But obviously, pandemics can be real, and there might be genuine threats down the horizon. If I were to ask you, if you're not so worried about the bird flu, at least as of now, and if COVID it certainly was mishandled and might even have been somewhat overblown, what do you worry about as you look across the horizon? Is there something that we should be alert to that would not be a kind of a government manipulated scare, but something we really ought to be scared about?
Well, I don't advocate for scaring the population. I really coined the term and advocate for the use of the term psychological bioterrorism. The exploitation of fear of infectious disease, I believe, is fundamentally immoral. And I don't advocate that people should be censored for doing so. It is, by the way, a marketing strategy. But rather, I advocate that they should be shunned. We should not highlight these people. We should not be seeing them on Face the Nation, et cetera, et cetera. they have the right to say what they want to say. And I think this is a fine line in the whole matrix of thinking about censorship. It's one of those things where we have to be really careful if we advocate for any prohibitions, because it's a slippery slope, as we've seen. In terms of threats, biologic threats, of course, one of the major biologic threats is fentanyl. And we're losing as many people to fentanyl as we were losing nearly at the peak of the claimed deaths associated with SARS-CoV-2. So that is a major public health crisis, and it ought to be treated as such. One that is an infectious disease threat that is not widely recognized or touted by corporate media, that is absolutely valid, is multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. That is a pathogen that has adapted to resist a variety of different treatments. And the only way to clear it is a person has to take very rigorous compliance with a multi-drug regimen over a long period of time, which the folks that accumulate multi-drug resistant tuberculosis typically are not socially or financially empowered or inclined to be highly compliant with a complex drug regimen. So, they're out there and spreading. I trained at Northwestern in Chicago, and tuberculosis was endemic in Chicago. So TB and MDR TB is a real bona fide threat. There is a lot of discussion about the effects of climate change. I don't want to opine about whether or not it's human associated, but there is evidence that there are changes in climate happening for natural or unnatural reasons. And those will be associated with environmental disruptions. And if we see a warming trend in the Rio Grande Valley, Florida, Louisiana, and southern US, we are already seeing the in-migration of certain mosquito species that support the replication of various viruses that are threats to human health. And so those are valid threats. And I think we need to think hard about how we're going to manage those threats, just like we would any other infectious disease threat. But Zika teaches that generating a lot of hype and fear around that is counterproductive. It just turns people off, particularly in this era. So I think the government now is in a position, and the public health community is in a position where they really have an enhanced burden of responsibility to ensure that they're communicating appropriately, effectively, and are not, how do I say this? There are financial and other conflicts of interest that exist within the public health community that create incentives to amplify concern about infectious disease pathogens. To be blunt, it's good for business. It's good for the pharmaceutical business. It's good for epidemiology. It's good for various public health officials. It's good for budgets for public health departments across the United States.
I mean, if you're Dr. Fauci, it gets you on the cover of Vogue.
I don't even want to touch Dr. Fauci with a 9-foot pole. But you take the point. And I had warned, not that anybody was listening to me back then, that a logical consequence of the way that COVID was being managed in terms of propaganda and information and the advocacy for overcoming vaccine hesitancy, that's the appropriate politically correct terminology, was going to have blowback or backlash or fallout consequent to the use of those methods, in that it was going to delegitimize the entire public health enterprise and vaccine enterprise. It was going to raise skepticism. And in fact, now that's documented. Some like Del Bigtree celebrate the fact that now something like 50% of the population consider themselves anti-vaxxers. That didn't have to happen. That was due to really, in my opinion, immature and poorly considered management decisions by overly enthusiastic public health administrators, notably the CDC. and by influence campaigns such as the teachers union that influenced Rochelle Walensky so strongly. So they kind of blew it. And now they're in a position where they have to try to rebuild public trust for the good of all. I don't think it's in our interest to have public health delegitimized. I think it's in our interest to have responsible public health and a responsible FDA and a NIH that's focused on promoting health, not promoting the pharmaceutical industry. I think those initiatives that are core to the Make America Healthy Again movement that has been so transformational are all valid concerns. And I hear rumor, living here so close to DC, that it is likely that Mr. Kennedy will be confirmed. But I also know that there's a lot of tensions. You mentioned the Trump, I'll say, transition period that we're in right now. I have many close friends that served in the prior Trump administration in senior positions that may or may not be in the new administration, but they are all of the opinion that President-elect Trump remains enthusiastically supportive of the Operation Warp Speed and the work product of that being the mRNA products, and is not likely to back down from that. So if you want to operate with that environment under that leadership, you're going to have to accommodate yourself to that fact and focus on the things that you can change. And that's a bitter pill for many people to swallow. But my counsel on Substack and others has been, in my endorsement of President-elect Trump, which preceded Bobby's, made the case that I regret that this is the case, but on balance, I felt personally, with my own ethics and politics, that electing Mr. Trump had sufficient benefits, likely to produce sufficient benefits compared to the alternative, that I went ahead and endorsed him, knowing that this particular issue that I've been so focused on for 4 years now is unlikely to prevail. At best, we may see more transparency in data.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can just offer a slight obiter dictum or comment, it is that getting Trump to admit that he was wrong on a major aspect of public policy is not very easy to do, as we recognize from his past career. But I understand exactly what you're saying, and this has just been, I think, a very informative and sober account of where things have gone wrong and how they need to be fixed. I'd love to have you back sometime, guys. I've been talking to Dr. Robert Malone, the inventor of mRNA vaccination. Follow him on X at RWMaloneMD or the website maloneinstitute.org. Dr. Malone, thank you so much, and let's do it again sometime.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for your courage and leadership also.
I'm continuing my discussion of the big lie. We're drawing parallels between the progressive left in America and the Democratic Party on the one hand, and fascism and Nazism on the other. I'm going to focus today on a remarkable incident in 1934 where the Nazis got together to discuss the Nuremberg laws. The Nuremberg laws were the laws that made Jews into second-class citizens. And there was a meeting of top Nazis in 1934. I'll tell you who was there. Bernhard Loesner, the principal drafter of the Nuremberg legislation. Franz Gertner, the Reich Minister of Justice. Roland Freisler, State Secretary of Justice Ministry, later head of the Nazi People's Court. Karl Klee, a presiding criminal court judge. And finally, a young man, Heinrich Krieger, who had studied in the American South at the University of Arkansas and was working in the Nazi Ministry of Justice. Now, the Nazis were very excited because they wanted to create the world's first racist state. And they were using the Nuremberg laws as a kind of demonstration project for how to do that. And remarkably, in the meeting, the young American, not the young American, but the young Nazi who had studied in America, said, hey, guys, we want to create the world's first racist state, but I'm sorry to tell you it's already been done. And the Nazis were like, what? Where? Who? When? How? And they were informed that the world's first racist state, or at least the world's first racist region, had been created by the Democratic Party in the American South. And the Nazis could hardly believe it. They were considering three questions: laws on interracial marriage, laws on immigration, and laws on segregation. And the Nazi who studied in America informed them that the policies of the Democratic Party in the American South were very illuminating in all three of these areas. The Nazis, to take the first point, which is interracial marriage, the Nazis were a little afraid to try to outlaw interracial marriage because they couldn't find any kind of precedent for it. But they were informed, the Nazis were, that the Democrats have done this, that there are laws outlawing interracial marriage. They're operating in the American South, and the Nazis could just copy those laws, just substitute and cross out the word black, put in the word Jew, and you're kind of off to the races. Then we come to the issue of immigration, and this was a kind of a complex issue for the Nazis, because the Jews, of course, weren't immigrants. They certainly weren't illegals. They lived in Germany. They were German citizens. But nevertheless, the Nazis were told that the United States has the Immigration Act of 1924. It had been pushed with strong progressive or left-wing support. It established quotas for immigration based on race, extending preferential treatment to whites, discriminating against browns and blacks. And the Nazis were like, well, that's an excellent policy for us to adopt as well. And then finally, on the issue the Nazis really cared about, see, at this point, they weren't thinking about killing the Jews or gas chambers. They were thinking about segregating them. Yes, they're in Germany. Yes, we want to pressure some of them to leave, but if they don't leave, we want to confine them to ghettos and Jewish neighborhoods and make them wear a star of a Star of David, that kind of like a scarlet letter that marks them out as Jewish. And once again, they were informed, guys, the Democrats are ahead of us. They've got segregation laws throughout the South, and the Nazis were like, again, we can just copy those. Now, the important point here is that the Nazis were directly influenced. They were using the blueprints of the Democratic South to establish the Nuremberg laws. And this is a fact, by the way, that you won't see in textbooks. I've never seen it on PBS or the History Channel. It has been aggressively suppressed in this country. Some years ago, a scholar at Yale, James Whitman, wrote a book called Hitler's American Model. But here the title alone gives it away, because what Whitman is trying to do is he's saying, I've got an amazing revelation. The Nazis got their ideas from America. Well, yes, but that's a very incomplete account. The Nazis didn't get their ideas from America. They got their ideas from the Democratic Party in the American South. Whitman doesn't want to say that, because if he says that, right away he exposes the fact that he is a Democrat, he is on the left, he's a progressive, and so the Nazis got their ideas from the party that he identifies with. And therefore, what he tries to do is to move the blame from the Democratic Party to America more generically. It's kind of like saying all the segregation laws which were passed by Democratic legislatures, which were signed by Democratic governors, which were enforced by Democratic officials, yet this now somehow becomes an American problem. America should pay reparations for segregation because America did it. No, America didn't do it. In fact, there were lots of Americans, there were lots of states that didn't have segregation. There were lots of Americans who not only didn't have a part of it, but they were opposed to it. So to simply put the blame on America generically, well, this is part of the blame America strategy of the American left. But the real lesson of all this is that there was, in fact, a careful monitoring of the racist policies of the Democratic Party, and those proved to be a source not only of general inspiration, but of legislation for the Nazis. That's how we got in the form that we did, the Nuremberg laws.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.